Okay, again, welcome to Purpose of this Book, David G. and David G. Where we are when we get started in the new content is the first full paragraph on page 93 in chapter 7, Working with Others. But before we get in, David's going to help us with a little recap of how we've gotten to this point.
Thank you, David. I'm David. I'm a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict. Yeah, guys. So we're in chapter 7, Working with Others. That is the charge of having had a spiritual awakening. So this awakening that we had is not for free. And if we want to keep it, it's highly suggested that I work with others. So that chapter starts on page 89, and it starts out with big letters of practical experience, meaning that this is not a theory. This is our experience. What we're supposed to do, we're supposed to show that nothing was so much assure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So intensive work with other alcoholics means one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball, when we can, or over Zoom. It works when other activities fail. What are other activities? Like going to the gym, going on date night, going shopping? Am I trying to avoid it? The point is that I should always be thinking of others. The 10-step discipline is turn my thoughts to someone I can help. That's what I'm supposed to be doing here. So then we're supposed to carry this message to the alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. So we are gifted and blessed with the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not my message. It's the message. The directions on how to work the steps are in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Then a lot of times in this book and number of pages here, because we're only up to page 93, Bill gives us a lot of approach references, a lot of approach references. And what he means by that is it's my job to approach the prospect. That's one of the terms that he uses, and that's on page 90. When you discover a prospect, where are we going to find prospects? In 2024, most likely we're at a meeting, right? We have meetings, thousands and thousands of meetings. So I would approach them at a meeting, and as David and I always stress, we get their phone number. They're not going to call us, most likely. At least in my experience, I don't get a lot of return phone calls. Why? Because the outside world, the external world started getting a little bit better. They got back to the work. The judge didn't give them a long sentence in prison or jail. Maybe he got a slap on the wrist. Maybe he made the border crossing with mama that night. Now, all of a sudden, that's not the problem at all anymore. So, my job to call. And then it gives us directions. So there's a lot of directions. I haven't really been pointing them out and what Bill does for us here, but there's direction after direction after direction. Some of us don't. One of them is don't deal with him when he's very drunk. You can see why that would not work well, right? Get yourself in a predicament. Also talks about there's 5 things I should be looking for on page 90 in the second paragraph. Get it, and it's halfway through the paragraph if you want to go there. I'll start out with the first sentence. The second paragraph. If there's any indication that he wants to stop, so I am taking his inventory, and I am listening to what he has to say. That he is a desperate alcoholic, possibly he wants to stop. Have a good talk with that person most interested in him. I'm not doing that. I'm not talking to his wife. Usually, is his wife. I just don't do that. Get an idea. Here's a direction. Get an idea of his behavior. Number 1, his problems. Number 2, his background. Number 3, the seriousness of his condition. And his religious learnings. Why do I need to know those things? I need to know those things so I know how to work with them. With some experience of a few 24 hours of working with others, some people have chronic relapse, or some people have religious teachings in their background. Some people brand new to the fellowship and don't know anything about the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They think Alcoholics Anonymous is our meetings. It's not. The fellowship is named after our big book. So I need to know those 5 things. To find out all I can about him. Then again, Bill's doing a lot of approach references, and I'll wrap this up by saying, mainly it tells us on page 91, third paragraph, see your man alone if possible. Again, another approach reference that I need to see him alone. One-on-one, maybe if I belong to a club, maybe I can have him over to my house, put myself in a safe position for him and I both. But also the other thing that Bill does here is, he is, especially on page 92 and 93, he's talking about the differences between religion and spirituality. Religion is a set of rules. Spirituality is a set of disciplines. Some of the rules that maybe you have in church, maybe if you're Catholic in Lent, you don't eat meat during Lent. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting it down. My wife's a Catholic and she doesn't eat meat during the Lent. Maybe a lot of kneeling, a lot of standing, sitting, a lot of stuff like that. If you want to wear a yarmulke, fine and dandy, all those things. But I need to know about that kind of stuff too. But at the same time, it's like that, those are religious, those are rules. Spiritual disciplines is what I got to try to live by today. And since I'm not spiritually fit enough, we let God discipline us in this way. This way are the 12 steps. So that's gonna. Oh, and then the other thing is because we talked about words that are very important, and I don't want to minimize and I don't want to bastardize anything at all when it comes to working with a newcomer. A lot of times we hear derogatory references directed towards a newcomer, like call them pigeons. I've heard that many times. I don't like it. I'm not a pigeon. I'm a sponsee. I don't poop all over my sponsor. I just don't do them things. Bill uses references in the big book. On page 90 at the top of the page, prospect. Great term, brand new. I made the approach. Bottom of page 92, where this will take us into where we're at now. Even though our protege, better term, protege, may not have entirely admitted his condition, to become curiously to know how you got well. So then the next italic writing says, tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. More italic writing. Now we are on page 93. Just wanted to point out the references. Want to talk about the difference between religion and spirituality. Neither of them, both of them are great and intertwined. That's a wonderful thing to do. But I always got to remember, for me anyways, God first, sobriety second, my wife third, children fourth, job fifth.
All right, thanks, David. So this next paragraph, where we're going to get into the new content on 93, I'm just going to start to read and pause for a second to set the context again. So it starts with, when dealing with such a person. So let's recall what kind of person we're talking about. If we go back into just above the italics in the paragraph before, it says, if the man be agnostic or atheist. So that's what we're talking about here. So when dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are.
Have you have anything?
Yeah. Arousing is to excite to action. Prejudice is judgment or opinion formed beforehand, an opinion leaning unfavorable to anything without just or sufficient reason, and theological, meaning divinely infused.
Thanks,
Well
Ed.
done.
Maybe I'll
Yeah.
hop in here.
Please.
So, yeah, so you know what we see so much in this chapter, and David did a nice job of recapping it, is there are a lot of very just practical instructions. Here is how I am supposed to do something, and a lot of it is very black and white direction. Now, a lot of other sort of bigger, more spiritual concepts are presented as well, but this is a very pragmatic paragraph right here. It's saying basically, when dealing with such a person, so when dealing with an agnostic or an atheist, just talk normally to describe these spiritual principles. So, yeah, and this is a great reminder for me today, because I can get all whipped up into a frenzy and start coming from the pulpit, very evangelical, because I'm such a, my life has been so dramatically changed by God and my spiritual life. But I have to remember, a newcomer is coming in. He doesn't get anything that I'm talking about. He just showed up because he can't stop drinking or drugging, and I can't give him a whole giant head full of God. Now, listen, we've gotten instruction earlier in the book. Again, here it says, yeah, I can talk about and stress the spiritual feature, but I'm encouraged to use some good decision making, some discernment, some good judgment around this, right? So it's saying just use basic language. And this is the same thing David and I do when we talk to newcomers, in treatment centers. We always go to page 27, as we so frequently do here, and Dr. Jung talks about the vital spiritual experience, and we come up with different words to explain that. And so, I always translate vital spiritual experience as a life-saving, bigger than human event. That's how I describe spirituality to newcomers. It's just bigger than us humans, So they're saying just use everyday language. There's no sense arousing any prejudice it may have against certain theological terms and conceptions. And guys, most of us, I think, come in with some of these, even those of us who came in with some religion, even those of us who came in with some religion and are kind of into that organized religion, we still, because we never really put that religious practice as a full sort of devotion to that faith, because if we had, maybe we would have had the spiritual experience we needed. So we held on to these reservations or these prejudices. So I think what Bill's saying here is this person, the newcomer, is already going to maybe have some ideas and maybe be confused of what does this mean, and are you trying to sell me religion? So just keep it simple. So don't raise these issues no matter what your own convictions are. And that's what I really start off by saying. I may love God. I may love my spiritual path. I may love being on the broad highway. And I'm going to tell the newcomer about this in good time.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback what David said and try not to be redundant here. But yeah, that prior paragraph where it talks about if the man be agnostic or atheist. So he doesn't have to agree with my conception of God. And I don't have to agree with his either by that. But I'm having an open mind. But what I'm going to ask him to do is write down on a piece of paper a list of traits that he would like his God to be like. That's all. And then he can write down whatever he wants. Is he kind, loving, timely, forgiving, whatever that is? It's a starting point. I got to have a jumping off point for me. And I just asked him to do that. Even if it's atheist or agnostic, I just ask him to do it. And then he'll hand it to me. I said, I'm not interested in seeing it. It's not mine. It's yours. Personal to you. That's what's important here. It's just personal to him. That's what we're trying to get here. I'm trying to get a personal relationship with my creator. And I can do that by getting unblocked through step 4 through 9 and living the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. That's my experience in the book that tells me how to do that. But I got to let go of my old prejudices. We won't get into that too quickly with him. But by the time we get to step 2, because we're going to get to step 1 quick with this guy, by the time I get to step 2, we're going to be talking about prejudices, old ideas, things that I have to let go of here, because step 2 is one of the solution steps that he's going to need to know about, that I need a power greater myself to restore me to sanity. That's one of the 2 solution steps. Step 3 is the other one. But that alone would not keep me sober. I have to do the works through 4 through 9 and live in the strict disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. But Bill gives us directions. These are directions. Call what you want. Suggestions. They're directions for me. You know, it's like we're talking about here at the bottom of that paragraph. Don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. I'm not forcing anything on anybody here. Again, I gave him the opportunity, or her or they, to write down what they need their God to have, what traits they need to have, just so they can make a beginning. That's all.
Okay, continuing on. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish, constructive action. You know, I'm going to pause right there, David, because this is a long paragraph. And let me just dive in again on this. So this is perfect timing, because this goes right back to page 27, where this concept is introduced to us, right? What happens back on 27? So let's bounce around the book, like our friend Paige says. If we go to 27, and I'll just quickly read through this. Right in the middle of the page, this is Dr. Jung talking to Roland Hazard about what he needs to do to stop drinking. So he says to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions such to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. Like I said, life-saving, bigger than human events. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. And he's talking about the promise of the 12th step that didn't exist yet. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, the stuff in my head, my heart, and my gut, which are once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying, as a human, he's been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful. maybe a certain kind of hard drinker, maybe not a real alcoholic, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the tie back to what we're reading in 93. Upon hearing this, our friend Roland, who Dr. Jung was talking to, was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So this is what's being described in this first part of this paragraph on 93, right? So we're talking to the newcomer and say, hey, I was raised in my religion, Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, whatever it was, doesn't matter. This, set of rules and guidelines. God is the most important thing to me. And I say, that's fantastic. I am so happy for you. That's going to make some of this easy for you to understand and digest. But what the newcomer in that position has to understand, that no matter how much they loved God, no matter how much they loved their religion, they had never fully given everything over to that higher power. And more than that, they had not acted enough on that faith. Were they living in the spirit of the fellowship? Were they in a sense of unity with the other people in that faith? And most of all, the biggest question, were they being of service in executing that religion? In my experience, especially in that last question, I already know the answer is no. Because when I meet religious people, generally speaking, I'm going to generalize here, and they are full of service, they tend to be really happy, pleasant, good people because they are out of self. Now, there are exceptions, of course, right? There's plenty of jerks everywhere. But people who really understand their faith and understand their God and really spend their time serving other people, they get it. They're doing this critical 1/3 of our triangle, 1/3 of our legacy, and they're just doing it through their church or their mosque or their synagogue. And God bless. This is why we don't have a monopoly on getting recovered. Somebody can go to church or synagogue or mosque or their Buddhist temple and they can get recovered. I'm going to celebrate that because I think I know what it's going to take. It's going to take an understanding of what it means to develop a new relationship with their higher power. I think they're going to need that. And I think they're going to need to be a part of a group. They're going to need to recover together, just like we do in 12-step recovery. But maybe most importantly, lifetime of service they've got to get into, because that's the only way I get out of self.
Yeah, so the top of that paragraph, it talks about his religious education and training may be far superior than yours. And I think I brought this up briefly last week. And to think about how things had to line up just the way they did. Bill was trying to rip people off of bar stools and get them sober by giving his religious experience with the whole thing. And he was having 0% success, none at all. And then he went home and, Lois said to him, hey, Bill, but you're staying sober. Oh, the light bulb goes on. Maybe you should go talk to Silky. See what he says. And he goes and talks to Silky. And Silky says, stop jamming that stuff down his throat. Start talking about what the problem is and what the solution is. Talk about the problem with this. Well, sure enough, he's in the Mayflower Hotel a few days later. I'm paraphrasing. I don't really know exactly how many days it was. But the bottom line is he makes a phone call. He gets an appointment with Bob. And he sits down with Bob. And he tells Bob what the problem was. And Bob says, I've never heard anyone explain that to me before like that. Oh, my God. Talk about spiritual nature, and really think about it, because Bob was in the Oxford group big time and had a lot of faith, but would go right home and drink and get drunk on his butt all the time. Always. Faith without works is dead. So he can never stay sober on his own power. So if Bill would have came with the religious facts to him, Bob would have buried him. It wouldn't have worked out. We wouldn't exist today unless there was some other form of two other people getting together, but everything had to line up the way it did. And I divinely inspired, divinely put together. That's the way I got to look at it. So, and then it says, he may be an example of truth that faith alone is insufficient. What is insufficient about that? Faith. Willpower is insufficient. Self-knowledge is insufficient. Frothy emotional appeal is insufficient, right? We've learned about that. We've read through the book. And all those things are insufficient to keep me sober. If they weren't, then I would be in a lot better condition when I came in here. and I could have stayed not stayed here. But on my own willpower, I can't stay sober. On my own self-knowledge, I can't stay sober. And my wife's pleading or my family's pleading to stop, please stop was never good enough either, because I have no power, no choice, no control. So and David brings up vital, to life-saving, life-giving. Those things are the things I brought up: the willpower, self knowledge, frothy emotional appeals. They're insufficient. The same way as if I was going to go to court, maybe I'll give this metaphor like this because I relate to this one. Because when I first got sober, I ended up going away for a little while because of the crimes I committed. This is not what happened to me, but if the evidence was insufficient, you would not get locked up, right? You would be released. In my case, that wasn't the case. The evidence was very big, and I went away for a little bit. But if it's insufficient evidence, you don't get convicted. Same thing here. The evidence that is insufficient here is that, and we know the evidence today is, I'm based on my own knowledge, that willpower, self-knowledge, and frothy emotional appeal is not enough to keep me sober. So, and it says, but here's what faith must be. It must be accompanied by, along with, not by itself. Faith alone is not good enough. It must be accompanied by what? Self-sacrifice. So thinking of others, and unselfish. Can't remove our own selfishness. So again, I got to be in the work. And constructive action, meaning that I got to put your common welfare before mine, and working one-on-one intensive work with other alcoholics to save the day. And this is what, for me, these are directions. This is what I have to be showing, I have to be living, I have to be providing for the alcoholic who still suffers. And that's why it's so important to study the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, so that I know how to do this with each and every individual. Because one size does not fit all, but there's great directions in the book for giving guidance.
And I'm sorry, Abby, I jumped right in over top of you. Did you have anything from this paragraph before I finish reading it?
I just have convictions, which is a convincing or being convinced, a strong belief.
Okay, thank you. So let me pick up. We're right in the middle of that paragraph on the bottom of 93. So I'm just going to reread that last sentence. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it, or he would not drink. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We're dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. Go ahead, David.
Anything, Abby? Okay, didn't want to cut you off there. Okay, let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Again, Bill is differentiating the difference between what religion and spirituality is, not putting down either one or just telling us that this is a spiritual program of action. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do. So the guy might say something to me like, I've got plenty of religion. Maybe my father was a minister. Maybe this is the case for him. And he says, but how come I can't stay sober? Or how come you can stay sober, but I can't? And I was like, well, on the bottom of the page, it talks about perhaps your story will help him see where he failed to practice the very precepts. Precepts is a general rule. If I don't practice the general rule of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not going to have a spiritual experience or awakening. Just not going to have one. But if I do have one, it's guaranteed that it'll work for me because it worked for millions of others. So I just asked him that simple question. When's the last time you got drunk? I know you go to church a lot. I know your father's a minister, or maybe you're a minister. Maybe you're a priest, maybe you're a rabbi. I know a few of them myself that come into the program. This, again, I need to have spiritual principles to be building a relationship with God. And then the next page here says, we have no particular faith or denomination. We do not, and I don't instruct very many people on when they talk about their higher power. I might suggest to them, and this is not right or wrong, don't write this in your book, for Christ's sake. No pun intended. use the word higher power sometimes, or God. You know, sometimes
Mhm.
I've heard other denominations use their God, and people get a little itchy. Just saying. So I'm just careful what I say because I don't want to offend anyone. I'm just trying to be a part of, not apart from, and I got to ask that question: am I trying to set myself apart? The same way as if I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and I say I'm an alcoholic and a gambler and a addict. Am I separating myself from the fellowship when I'm in an AA meeting? Because the tradition says, you know, that the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. It doesn't say anything about dope, and I'm not saying it doesn't bring up dope in the big book, because it surely does. Dr. Bob takes those goofballs, you know, he's digging those things and saved his life probably too. But the thing is I'm not an ANDA, you know, so that was my point in that. So what we are dealing with general principles common to most denominations. Where did Bill get this from? All the teachings that Bill got the 12 steps from were from, none of them were alcoholic. None of them. Now, this book is written by an alcoholic for alcoholics, but all the spiritual divine principles that he got were from non-alcoholics. And I don't have them all written down right now what they are, but there was a lot of people that God put in his path for him to put this work together in this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not to diminish that Bill put this together, because he did.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I just want to go back to this. I read this one a couple times. I ended with it and then I started with it again. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. To be vital, to be life-sustaining, to be life-giving. For faith to be able to give life. Think about this. It must be accompanied by self-sacrifice, the sacrifice of self, right? An unselfish, constructive action. That means where I've got no personal motive, I am seeing what I can bring to life to improve things, to help, to aid, to assist. Right? And I'm never going to be in a position ever. I don't have to worry about this, about trying to instruct anybody on religion. And I just assume everybody knows more about religion than me anyway, so I don't have to worry about this direction to Bill. But I do trot this out quite a bit when I am talking to newcomers and they tell me how they were raised with religion. You know, and I said this, I'll just double down. And it's like, okay, great, I'm glad, but how you were doing it was not sufficient. So now we're going to define a new relationship for you with this God that you already have. Right? And this is what's going to save your life. And hopefully they get the sense of this, right? That they see where they failed to practice the very precepts they know so well. Yeah, maybe, or maybe just by hanging around and doing a little listening and a little big book study, we can be demonstrations and people can just pick up these new ways to approach. I don't know. Top of 94, more direction. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital, there's that word again, part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. This is some tall orders we're laying out here, right, guys? Make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you've perhaps made a friend. Maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. Let me read that one more time. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to to follow your suggestions. What do you got, Abby?
I've got endeavoring, which is to make an effort, sane, which is mentally sound, having a rational mind, and disturbed, which is to throw into disorder or confusion, to agitate the mind.
I guess I'll go. Okay. So outline the program of action in plain language. I think that's what I mean. Not to get confused with the new book that's coming out in November, the plain language big book. That's not what I'm talking about. Do not until we study it. I don't get to have a prejudice until we look at it. So that is just a joke. It's a stupid joke, but it was. So outline the program of action in plain language. So meaning step 1 is our problem. I could do that if I want. Step 2 and 3 is our solution steps. Step 4 through 9 gets me unblocked from the things that are blocking me, so that I may come to the solution. And then steps 10 is and 11 and 12 are the strict disciplines, spiritual disciplines. They keep me centered. They keep me in the world of the spirit. So that's kind of how I would explain it. And then it says, explaining how you made a self-appraisal. So self-appraisal meaning that I conceded my innermost self. It could be that, how I ran to step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself because I found out I was powerless, that I needed power, and I needed a God in my life desperately. Or it also can mean steps 4 through 7 that I make this self-appraisal, right? You know, that I did a 4-column inventory or 5-column, whatever way you want to do yours, it doesn't matter. And then how you straighten out your past, meaning amends, made amends, change. Amends means change. And why you're now endeavoring to be helpful to him. That is 12-step work. Why am I doing this? Because you're saving my life. You're helping me more than I'm helping you. And then it says it's important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. So another definition that I have on for vital is important for the success or continued existence of something. A vital mean for me anyways means important for the success or continued existence of something. So if I'm going to exist or have any success, or if he's going to exist or have any success, I have to carry this message. It's not an option, it's an obligation that I do that here. Then it says, actually, we may be helping you more. I just said that. Again, this is not a selfish program. You hear people, this is a selfish program. No, it's not. It's a selfless program. Less self, more God, right? Less David, more God. Less David, more you. Just as long as David is not on the top of that pecking order, and that's what the 11-step inventory is for. That's what 10 spot check inventory is for all day long. So actually, he may be helping you more than you're helping him. Make it plain that he's under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. I'm going to give him a vision that he is going to be working with others. That is my goal. You are going to work with others quickly. We got that window opportunity that the window did not slam shut, and you started doing the work right away. We got right to a 4-step. You sat down, you did it. We did 5, we did 6 and 7, and then you made out your list. I didn't edit it. We prayed about it. You went out and made your amends. And then as you're making your amends, you started writing 10, 11, and 12. And someone approaches you. I mean, I was sponsoring people when I was 3 months sober. I started sponsoring my first guy when I was 3 months sober because I've had a spiritual awakening. And I started taking them through the work. My sponsor is preparing me for that the whole entire time. It doesn't matter how much time you have, as long as you're a page ahead of them in the big book, I believe. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying. And then it says, suggests how important it is that he places the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Let's go back to page 20, top of the paragraph. Our buddy Eddie, David's one of his guys' favorite paragraph. You know, David and I emphasize this quite often. You know, we know David's favorite page is 27. Eddie's is page 20. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depends upon our constant. How often is constant, David? I think it's always, right? Constant thought of others and how we may meet their needs, not ours, theirs. That's what I go to there. And then it says, make it clear he's under no pressure. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you helped him. If a guy doesn't want to work with me, there's nothing I can do. I can't chase him down. I've worked with hundreds of people, and I don't know what happened to a lot of them. I don't know. I ran into them at the grocery store and they seemed some be fine. Some of them showed up at their funeral. Some of them I've seen them in jail when the jail around here used to accept volunteers. They said they don't have a drinking problem in the jail by us, by the way. So that's why we don't get to go there anymore. Are you kidding? Everybody in there is for drinking and drugging. That's what they said. So whatever. So we're not invited back anymore. But yeah, and I run into them in jail. I show up and they're like, hey, the guy's like, hey, there's my sponsor. I'm like, dude, quiet. Don't tell anybody that. You're in jail, bro. And I jokingly say that, but it's just like, if you would have done this work, you probably wouldn't have ended up here. If your talk has been sane, so these are my directions. The real directions for how I should have my talk. If my talk was sane, quiet, full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Absolutely. Why? Because we're going to do this shoulder to shoulder, right, Ashton? That's what we do. I'm not more, and after he recovers, he's not more sober, and I'm not more sober than he is. That's not it. Shoulder to shoulder, we'll do this work together. Sometimes my sponsees have to wear the sponsor hat. Sometimes that's the case. I give them spiritual consent. So that's just how it works for me. I don't do any of this alone. And maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. Disturbs means make him uneasy when it comes about alcoholism. Like thinking that he can do this on his own willpower or self-knowledge, thinking that he can manage his own life. How is that going for you? The bedevilments on page 52. That's how, if I do that work like that, qualify him on page 44, take him to the benevolence on page 52, and ask him how he's doing on his own power. That probably, at least my and David's experience when we go to treatment centers, that seems to disturb them people. Their butts get a little moving around in the seat a little bit. They get a little antsy, right? Because we hit a nerve. We hit a nerve. So this is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, David read that twice, and I believe that too, the better. I was hopeless. I don't even know that was it. And I brought it up a couple weeks ago. I had that moment of clarity where God froze the liar in me just long enough to see the truth. And I knew that this was my life and it was never going to get any better than this. And that's when I reached out and asked someone in AA to help me. And I haven't had a drink or a drug since, you know. And then it says he will more likely to follow your suggestions. If you're hopeless, wouldn't you? Yeah, I did. I believe, I don't know, you'd have to ask my old sponsor, my first sponsor. I think I did everything he asked me to do. Dude, I did not want to drink and drug anymore, and I was tired of hurting people. And I'm a liar. Oh my God, if my lips were moving, I'm lying. You know, and I had all those things had to change. You know, and I didn't have the ability to do all those things. But if you practice these principles, if I practice these principles to the ability that God gives me, because he gives you the ability, and my experience, and each step as we go along the way, he gives me the ability to work 1 into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into 4, and so on and so forth. Because I don't have the ability to do 9 on day 1 when I haven't worked 1 through 8 first. I just don't have that ability. But he gives me the ability to do that. And then if I'm that of hopeless variety that Bill was, and I drank, thought, and felt like Bill, then I will follow those directions. Because if I start debating whether or not I need to do these things or not doing a 4th step, I'm just throwing this out there to see what you guys think. Is that a reservation? That's all I got.
Thanks, David. So outline the program of action, otherwise known as our 12 steps, right? And what's an outline? It means it's a summary. It's a bullet. You know, maybe we could go to page 58 and just sort of quickly, 59 rather, and just quickly read them. I'm going to outline it for them. We're going to get into more detail once we really start working together. And using those steps as context, explain how you made a self-appraisal. Well, how do I do a self-appraisal in the context of that outline of the steps? Well, I could quickly explain 1, 2, and 3, and maybe go to page 44, go through those questions and say, yeah, you know, when I start drinking, I can't control the amount, and when I stop, I can't stay stopped, and because of those things, and I probably need a spiritual course of recovery. How you straightened out your past sounds like steps 4 through 9, right? That is the program to get recovered. And then why you're now endeavoring to be helpful to him? Well, because I'm living in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. 10 and 11 make sure that I'm in God's service, right? If I'm taking these steps actively and ongoing. And then David talked about the obligation of the 12th step, that if I'm really in service of God and being his agent, I will be very clear on how I need to help. Right? It's important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this up plays a vital part, again, vital, a life-saving, life-sustaining part in my recovery. Right? And we talk about this a lot, and David just made a point of it again. I will not get recovered successfully in my personal experience and the experience of other people if I set out to get what I need. That means if I have a selfish interest. But the beautiful thing about how this program was crafted, and again, based on spiritual precepts and practices that have been around for thousands of years, if that I just focus on helping other people, if I try to become selfless, then I get what I need, right? As a selfish, inherently selfish guy, I just want what I want. I want what I need. But how do I get that? How do I get mine? I get mine by helping you. That's the only way this could work for a room full of selfish alcoholics and addicts and compulsives, right? Is if we got what we needed. And we do by serving other people. Right? Goes on to say you may be helping him more than helping. And maybe some of you guys have heard, I used to hear this a lot in the rooms of AA when I was first getting sober, maybe as a downtown Chicago thing, or I don't know, maybe people say it elsewhere. They'd say, it's something, I'm paraphrasing because I don't hear it anymore, but it was something like, it's like the job of the sponsee, or the point of having a sponsee is to keep the sponsor sober. And it's, it's a little bit of twisted perspective, but it's essentially what's being said here, that by me being of service, trying to help the desperate drinker, I am going to get a little bit more of what I need, right? And Dr. Bob talks about this too. Let's bounce again. Let's bounce forward to Dr. Bob's story, to the very end, page 181. Actually, let's go to the bottom of 180, bottom paragraph. What did Dr. Bob say about this, helping newcomers? The bottom, he said, I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want and need it badly, which is exactly what we're studying right now. I do it for 4 reasons. So Dr. Bob's breaking this down. He's being real with us. Reason number 1, sense of duty, right? He's saying that's my obligation that is charged to me in the 12th step, and I am carrying that out. I'm carrying this message to other alcoholics. Number 2, it's a pleasure. That means I get enjoyment, legitimate joy, helping other people get their lives saved. Number 3, because in doing so, I'm paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me, right? So I'm paying it forward and I'm paying it back. I always say when I come into recovery, I got an empty cup, empty spiritual cup. And you guys fill it up, fill it up, fill it up for me. And I get well. And by the time that cup is filled, it's time for me to start pouring it out. Because this alcoholic cannot have a full cup, right, of anything. I got to keep passing it forward. And then number 4, this is Dr. Bob being perhaps the most real. Because every time I pass on what I've learned to others, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip, right? We know the time this book was written, right? Dr. Bob, Bill, they hadn't been sober that long. They wrote this book. They'd been sober, Bill, the longest, right? 4 years when this thing was published. It's nuts. Could you guys imagine writing this? Right? David's 25 coming up years in. I'm over 2 decades myself. I know we got a bunch of other long timers here with us. Could you imagine writing this book today, guys? There is no way. It's amazing and a miracle they did this. But Dr. Bob's point is like, he wasn't so confident, and maybe he oughtn't be, maybe none of us ought be in his recovery at this point, that he's like, I got to keep doing this because I remember I don't ever want to go back out. His insurance, he was building up his spiritual suit of armor. Right? Back on 94, make it plain he's under no obligation to you. You're just trying to help, Again, the obligation is for us to carry the message. No newcomer is obliged to do any work with us or spend any time with us at all. Suggestion, it's important that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. I can suggest that all I like. That fell on deaf ears from me because being a selfish guy for 30 years, this concept of being in service was very foreign to me. But now I'm at the point, because of the direction here in the book, I tell newcomers right out of the gates, if you want 12-step recovery, if you want what we're here talking about when we go to treatment centers, et cetera, I say, just so you know, you're signing up for a lifetime of service. This is not just, I'm going to get mine. Yeah, I'm going to get mine by helping you, but this is a lifetime. This is a commitment. This is an obligation, right? So he's not under any pressure, doesn't have to see me again, you know? And yeah, I'm not going to be offended if he doesn't want to work with me. I can only do this one way. I can only take a newcomer into recovery through the work in the book, be a part of the community and be in unity and be of service. I only know one way to do it, the way that I do it today. I got asked by a sponsee one time who just didn't want to do the work exactly my understanding, interpretation of the book. And she said to me, I said, I don't know another way to do it. And she said, well, could you ask your sponsor? I said, no. I said, my sponsor is a big book guy like me. We only got one way. I said, it might work, but we're not going to experiment on my time. You're welcome to work with another sponsor, and maybe that'll work for them. But we're coming out of the book if you want to work with me. You know? So this is a really important line too. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. So where are we at this point? We have at least taken the first 9 steps and are in the midst of making amends, because right by the time I'm into 9, the book instructs me to get into 10, 11, and 12. So hopefully by this point, I can approach having some of these behaviors, being sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, which is a selfless approach, by the time I have done the work heretofore in the steps. It's not suggested to me for anything I do, say in step 2 or step 3, to approach something sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, because I probably can't approximate those behaviors yet. But I'm told I ought to be by this point. And if I can't be sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, I'm probably going to fail in my obligation to help the newcomer in the way that I need to. Right? So these aren't just fluff words, guys. This is direction. If I can do that, perhaps it made a friend. Maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. David talked about that. I think that happens pretty regularly. I think we always do a nice job, any of us, when we talk, share our own experiences, we build some rapport with the newcomer. I think we're pretty effective at disturbing someone about their drinking. Have we disturbed them enough? Have they had enough pain? That's the kicker that we can't control. So this is all to the good if we disturb them. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He'll be more likely to follow your suggestions. And this is a great paradox. And I want to bounce you guys one more spot. If we bounce forward, where am I? To page 110. This is in the chapter to wives. I love there are these 4 descriptions of alcoholics. And I love these. This is probably my favorite descriptions of alcoholics in the book, where alcoholics and drinkers are described, you know, in several different chapters, doctor's opinion, more about alcoholism, etc. So if you look at, really, I guess it starts on the bottom of 109. This is type number 3. So if you're not familiar with this, type number 1, they're like, okay, maybe he's only a heavy drinker. And then type number 2, your husband's showing lack of control. But then type number 3, it's starting to get pretty heavy. It says this husband has gone much further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Like, this is a guy who's in pretty bad shape from his drinking. Maybe the doctor's been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums, treatment centers, right? And hospitals has begun. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop, but he cannot. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. But then how do we close this? You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. So we've already had 2 types of alcoholics before this. Increasingly, I was going to say getting better, getting worse, worse, worse. And then in number 3 here, they're like, and now number 4, of course, is going to be worse than number 3. But number 3 sounds bad enough. This guy's got nothing going. He's got no friends. He's got no job. He's got no health. He's got nothing. He's got maybe his wife holding on to him before she throws him out. But it closes with, you can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. Why? Because back on 94, the more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. If somebody has not gotten beat up enough, are they really going to be on board? Are they going to look at the steps on the wall, or when I outline it for them, are they going to say, yeah, man, I can dig it? I love, and it doesn't happen that frequently. What happens most of the time when I talk to newcomers is they just say, yeah, David, yeah, I'll do all this stuff. And then they don't, you know? I've had a couple of situations where people have just said, hear you, thank you. Earnestly, thank you. I'm not ready. A good buddy of ours, John out here, his son, Matt, I had this experience with him a couple of years ago. Me and some good friends of ours did a first step meeting for him Saturday morning, our group, our AA group, took him in a side room, talked to him, like, explain to him as I normally do, first step and all this. A bunch of guys said great stuff, and he heard us all out. And at the end said, do you want to share anything? He said, guys, thank you. I'm just here because of my dad. I am not ready to stop drinking. And he wasn't a jerk about it. He was cool. He's just like, I'm not here for me. I'm here for my dad. Like, okay, Matt's got 10 months sober now. He finally got to his time. Took him a little bit. He had to get a little bit more beat up, right? I see him every Saturday, and he always shares. Sounds like he's doing great. I hope he never drinks or drugs again. Right? Can't control this. People will hear it when they're ready, and they got to be properly beaten.
Let me piggyback a little bit off of it. I
Please.
love that you went to the Dr. Bob's Nightmare. I love that you went to the Doctor's Nightmare on page 181. And the first two, yes, that sense of duty, yeah, it's my obligation to do that. And it is with pleasure. We just read on page 89, the 12-step promises on the second full paragraph. Life will take on a new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must, long dramatic pause there, guys, not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spots of our lives. Oh my God, I love running into you guys everywhere I go. Then it says the third thing there, because back to 181 and Doctor's Nightmare. Because in so doing, I'm paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. I used to tell my first sponsor, thank you so much. Thank you. He goes, I owe you. I'll never be able to pay you back. He goes, you owe me nothing. That guy that just came in, that smelly guy, go get him, Tiger. That's who you owe. You owe him. Go get him, Tiger. And I would work with a lot of those guys. Then the last one there, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. There's a lot of people counting on me to stay sober, guys. There's a lot of people who counting on me to stay sober, especially coming up on 25 years. Not only just my wife and my kids and my grandchildren, my employer, all my customers, people in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. I better all day long be thinking about on page 85 that this is how we react so long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. That is my responsibility to stay in fit spiritual condition, not God's. If I want those 10-step promises to come true for me, I have to stay in fit spiritual condition. I don't want to pick up a drink. I can have permanent sobriety. And David went to two wives, and he went to the category number 4, and it talks about it on page 110, the first paragraph, the last sentence. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. That is a recovered reference. Recovered, past tense, recovered. I want the stinky guy. That's who I want. I want the stinky guy. That's my guy. Don't go over him. He's mine. I want that guy.
Yeah, I will triple down on what David's saying. I have sponsored some women in the past, and they'd be like, how can I help? How can I pay you back? I don't know. I feel like women, you're so much more emotional creatures than we men. Like we're always trying to be tough guys and to be, masculine and afraid to show our feelings. And so the dynamic of sponsoring women is different. And I say, here's one thing I want from you. I could be some creepy male and try to have some awful sex relationship with you, or I could have you come over and do yard work for me, or there's all sorts of ways in which, as a sick guy, could take advantage of this male-female relationship. I say, you know what I want from you? To go sponsor women. Please go sponsor women through the book. That's all I want from my female sponsees. That's it. Because at least out here in rural Illinois, there's not enough big book women sponsors, we need them. That's all I want. I said, I don't want to sponsor women anymore. I just want to sponsor men. This is the only thing I want from you. And guess what? In my male to male, men to men relationships too, that's pretty much all I want for the guys too. I might pal around with the guys a little bit more. I might be more friendly with them, right? Because it's safe and comfortable a little bit. But I want one thing. I want them to carry this message. You guys heard me do it before. I'm not going to go into the whole thing again. Now I'll save it maybe a couple more months down the road. But the power of reach that we have, that if we just sponsor 3 people and get them to God through this book, and they sponsor 3 people, and they sponsor 3 people, so on down the line, we can literally help every alcoholic, every addict, every compulsive, every self-harmer, anybody who's powerless over a process or a substance. We could help every person on the entire planet in pretty short order. The reason why we don't is because we fall down on our obligation to carry the message. That's it. David talks about it, and I think he got it from one of the Raymer brothers. Piss poor sponsorship is our problem, right? We are able. And I know I'm preaching to the converted. All you guys are showing up here, right? Who show up for any of these big book companion meetings, or our friends Howard and Kathy are here. I know a bunch of you guys study with them. You guys are the converted. You guys are the choir. You don't have to listen to us on the soapbox, but maybe hear us soapbox and then get up on your own soapboxes, right? So we get everybody. I'm not going to stop soapboxing on this until we've got 800 million people in 12-step recovery, 1/10 of the planet's population, because the science, the data says 10% of our population is addicted to something. And we know how to help them with that. We get them to God, and we get them to stop being selfish jerks. All right. Last thoughts, David? We're ready.
So in that paragraph, I hope I disturbed him enough. I hope I made him so very uneasy when it talks about alcoholism. And again, just to go back, page 52 in the Bedevilments is just a great page to get them uneasy, just to make them very uneasy on your own power. How are you doing with personal relationship, so on and so forth. But right before that, those directions that we talked about, if your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. Now, every time I sit with a sponsee, it's not always sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. Trust me. When someone hasn't 10-step with me for a very long time, or haven't done any of their 9-step amends, present company excluded, that surely hasn't happened to any of my guys on this call, right? I'm sure of that. But one of the greatest compliments, because I too am blessed with the permission of my wife, I work with a couple women, and I started sponsoring a woman, I don't know how, 10 years ago, maybe, not even that long. She was 20 some years sober at the time. She's 30 plus. She'd never been through the work. And I took her through the work. And one of the greatest compliments I ever heard, and also one of the greatest experiences I ever had, is watching her life change in front of my very life. I'm just the messenger. I am not the message. But she said something to me that just kind of made me tear up a little bit. You make me feel safe. Make me feel safe. My job is to make you feel safe, that you feel comfortable, that you want to keep coming back here. You want to do this work, that we do this work shoulder to shoulder, and we can do this to have permanent sobriety. So thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you, Rob, for all that you do for us always, my friend. Abby, thanks for definitions.
I guess I should admit one thing. The 2 women that I used to sponsor, who are actually a couple, I do put them to work once a year. We put a huge sober Christmas party on, and they always come over and help me and Becky run the whole thing. So, yeah. But they offer.
You guys are ever in Illinois around Christmas time, you got to come to David's. It is a bash. It is a lot of great food, a lot of great fellowship, and there's 70 plus people. He's got a nice spread over there.